Yes, on a daily basis. Where do you get it from? I get it from Mr. X. I do certain chores for him, and he supplies me with my weed on a daily basis. And you could imagine that? How long have you been smoking for? Over 5 years. And mother nor father had any clue. So we too have to teach the parents what sort of signals to look for. Because they display it, you know. They display it. I mean, the lips get discolored and the fingers and all sort of stuff. But if you don't teach them, how would they be able? Because they'll be the last person to suspect that the children doing something wrong. And even when they know, they try to keep it under the carpet because they feel it would bring shame and disgrace to the family. But then at the same time, they're not seeking help for the young man.
And as well, in the addition to the warning signs that someone may be, under the influence, drinking or even smoking marijuana, they have other warning signs. You have the aggressiveness, the anger, the irritability that this person will show. You have the mood changes, maybe you have the energy level changes. You also have changes in the appetite and, sleeping habits, as well as difficulty focusing and feeling restless or on edge. So these are all warning signs that can be easily picked up by the parents, teacher, or the doctor. Like, okay, there's something wrong here with this person, and then we can further investigate what the problem is.
Now, what are some of the recommendations that you would have for men in terms of how they can take care of their health?
Well, for me, personally, and for everyone in the general public to know, we first have to acknowledge that there is a problem. As soon as we acknowledge that there is a problem, the next step is asking for that help. Break down the barriers of the false thinking of, being vulnerable, being weak, and go out and ask for help. Now, when we, face our fears, we ask for help, then is how we'll be able to start expressing feelings and openly talking to our healthcare providers about what's actually happening to us. So in order for us to move forward from this point, we have to, education and that openness and that willingness to express how we're feeling will go a far way. But we first have to get over the stigma by asking for help, making the first step, rather. And from there, we'll be able to do everything as it relates to our health. We're able to take a greater control. We're able to have proper treatments and live happier, healthy, longer lives.
Yeah, sometimes you have to take them on a guilt trip. You got to give them the blunt facts. Most of the time when you find persons involved in substance use, they tend to become less productive. They don't even want to get up to go and work.
Right.
So you have to say to them that there's an aspect of our socio-economic situation where you make contributions into Social Security. And just like how the persons who went before your parents, they are now benefiting because of the contribution that your parents made. You now would have to contribute in order for your parents to benefit.
Right.
Because, unless what? Your parents would work until they're 200? You contribute in order for your parents and your grandparents to reap benefits from Social Security. If there's this void in the contribution, nothing would be there for your parents, or even your teachers who teach you so well in school. Nothing would be there. The Social Security would just dry up. And then what would happen? We have a society that would be malnourished, unhappy. We would not be a touristic society anymore because we wouldn't be producing that smile. Touristic society is supposed to be, you have this smile, radiating smile that will resonate with the tourists and say, yes, we are feeling welcome. Mm-hmm. But if you are unhappy, you're disgruntled, you're not even eating well, how can you provide even a brick in a touristic society? You have to let them know they're guilty. You're not making any contribution. You want to go to the hospital and you want to be looked after freely. There's a cost to it. Sometimes we have to let them know the cost. I don't know why the government would not do this. Tell us the cost of looking after a patient on average at the hospital and to what extent the government has to subsidize it. A lot of subsidization takes place at our medical facilities. And if you only let them know, they would stop incurring injuries on people and they'll get a better understanding. Look, if I don't look after my parents, if I don't be there for my children, Well, if you're not there for the children, how the children will contribute to make sure that you, in turn, is a relay. How would you benefit if you're not looking at making any contribution? And those aspects of our society where persons are being rewarded for work done, but yet no contribution is made to Social Security, we have to get on top of that. Everybody should be making a contribution.
Yes, I totally agree. And part of the issues of men, the responsibility, making a contribution to society, taking care of their children,
Right.
the whole issue of being a responsible father. I think even though those things do not really speak to physical health, they speak to social health and mental health.
Right.
Because if you are of a right frame of mind, then you will be a responsible man. You will be a responsible father. You will be a responsible citizen within the society in terms of the contribution that you make towards the society. And all of these things, I think, too, are issues pertaining to men that speak to the health of men. They speak to the health of men. The way that you think.
Mindset.
Your mindset. Right. Your worldview. Because here it is that we are speaking about men's health. But there's a particular worldview when it comes to men's health. And I have a perspective on health and how I view health. But is my perspective a healthy one? Is my mindset a healthy one? Because if my mindset is not a healthy one with respect to my own health, then it starts in my mind, and so therefore my actions would not be actions that would be in the best interest of my own health.
Right.
I know that in the Caribbean on a whole, they say that we suffer with NCDs, non-communicable diseases. That's a biggie.
It's a huge one.
Right? Where is the heart disease, diabetes, hypertension, and things like that. Now, what I want you to tell me, Dr. Carty, is there a higher prevalence among males than females when it comes to NCDs?
Yes, there actually is, because as we've been discussing this whole time, we will have the problems and won't seek the help. So we will find there are a great number of males, especially male of color, like ourselves. We will be prone to hypertension, diabetes, and other NCDs, and not seek the appropriate help. So we as women will want to go and get help. We won't. We will stay and suffer in silence. And like I mentioned earlier, a lot of these things can be prevented by our habits, how we live our daily lives. So that is why we will suffer most. We will have the most illnesses because we don't go out there. We don't do our research. We don't seek that advice. So, and in terms of hypertension or high blood pressure, that in of itself, we call it in the medical field the silent killer, because it can not only damage your heart, it affects the brain, it affects the lungs, it affects the kidneys, it affects your sight, it affects, the extremities. So we as a woman will be able to easily, control do their diet, do their exercises, and seek medical attention. We will just try and sweep it under the rug. We will try and tough it out. And a lot has to do with our eating habits and our lifestyle. Just like in the case of diabetes, the large consumption of sugar, the sweets, the eating habits of all sort of hours, the high cholesterol meals, the saturated fats, will always be higher than women in terms of the NCDs, because we're not looking after ourselves in terms of health than a woman would. So we will ultimately suffer the consequences, which
Right.
unfortunately to most of those is death.
So you're speaking in terms of, we also have to speak in terms of prevention.
That is one of
preventative measures.
that is one of the
Checkups.
most, that is one of the
Men
most.
don't like to
Screening?
go and get
No.
checkups.
They don't want to know. They prefer not to know.
They prefer not to know.
I would like to get in there, though, Mr. Williams, with respect to You have a lot of single parent homes. And when we speak of single parent home, most of the time it's a female. And sometimes I feel our court system is a bit guilty of nurturing a particular culture. Because what you do is you take a male to court for child maintenance. You say, well, give $80 a week. And that $80 is given religiously. Sometimes you have to pull and a raise a reach up like 10,000. I wonder. You know, when this thing happens, how could your raise reach in thousands? And then the court would just say to you, well, you have to pay up their raise. What happened to the child in the interim? Was the child comatose so that they don't have to be fed or anything? You know, we have to be careful. And then when summertime, and the children would have played and getting ready to go back to school, it is still the same $80. When you have to go buy uniform, buy books, buy shoes, how could somebody with a conscience still give a single parent, you're not a part of the house, the same $80 coming on to the first term of the school year? It is not right. And some of them, even though they make sure that they don't want to be exposed or caused by the square, so they make sure they give the money on time. But what happens? You go and you deliver the money, you turn off. So the child now feels as if there is no love coming from the father. Right. And with no love coming from the father, there's always a group that is willing to embrace that child. Embrace that child. And he said, well, since I get an embrace here, there's no need for me to go to school, I stay here, lime, drink my rum, and I also get involved in my smoke. All these are ramifications of fathers who just drop off money. Not even a little walk to the park. You understand? And until, as a culture, as a people, we change that, we're going on a slippery slope. It must not be. The order at the court must be, you pay the $80 and you come for the child at least 3 days out of 7. Take the child wherever you want to go, bring back the child safely. We have to start mixing those monetary orders with more social orders. Come and do some homework with the child. Come and do this, come and do that. Let the child know that it is fully embraced.
Right. Again, I think that comes from sometimes how men are socialized within the society to believe that the mother or the woman is the primary caregiver and that the man's role. But we are seeing a change in that recently in society. We are seeing more men being involved in the lives of their children. More emotional involvement. More emotional involvement. Sometimes you see them, they have their sons at the barber shop, or you see them taking them for walks and things like that. Mind you, we still have a great way to go. And there's more of that that needs to be done. But you are right. I don't think it is just a financial obligation that you have to a child, but you have to get involved in that child's life, the emotional involvement, the social care, and the relationship aspect of it. Your relationship to that child is extremely crucial.
Definitely.
You being a role model for that child and being there for that child is absolutely crucial.
It is.
And so all of these things, I think, have to do with health. Men's health issues. It's not just the physical, but you have to look at the social. You have to look at the emotional. You have to look at the something we haven't touched, the mental, and we have to look at the spiritual. The spiritual. Sometimes we don't want to, men don't like, and I'm not just talking about going, because spirituality and religion are two different things. I'm not just talking about going to church, but what do I feed myself with? Do I feed myself with negativity? Do I feed myself with positivity?
Right.
You know, all of these things can really affect a man's health. Who are the people that I surround myself with on a daily basis? My company. The philosophies that I inculcate or that are inculcated into me, and so on. These affect a man's perspective on life, his worldview, his actions, and all of that. What do you say, Nita?
The great philosopher once said that a person is a mind with a body, not a body with a mind. So therefore the mind must be in control at all times, at all times. The further went on to divide the self into 4 selves. They call it the Johari window. The known self, the unknown self, the hidden and the blind. And some of us will have to learn to listen to people more. God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth because he wants us to listen more than how we speak. So you must take some time out and schedule some listening time, because the known self is what you know and others know about you. That's the known self according to the philosopher. The hidden self is what you know about you that you don't allow others to know. The blind self is what others see about you that you can't see about yourself. So that you have to listen. And then the last part that is so crucial is the unknown self. The unknown self you don't know about, and other person, your friend or your family don't know about. So very slowly you'll find somebody doing something and you hear their friends and no, not Peter at all. Because we don't expect, Peter himself will say, I can't believe I do that. That is the unknown self coming out. Because you don't know about it and your friends and your family don't know about it. Only when something might have taken place, they can do some extrapolation and say, well, this was inside of you. But that is why we have to listen. Right. And when you get a chance to nurture somebody, because of that unknown self, you have to make grounds on it before it takes over an individual. I went to see somebody at the time who committed murder at the station, and the person looking at me, I did not believe that the person did it, because I would have just left the place there about 2 hours ago. And the person looked so confused, as if I did this, and I looking at him and said, you did that? That is the unknown self. Right. So we got to be aware that certain things about people that we don't know. So whatever we can mold and nurture, we must mold and nurture them.
And in addition to that, I absolutely agree with you in terms of the listening and the speaking, because sometimes all a person may need is someone to talk to. Like, take the time out to listen to what someone may be going through, and they will be able to express, okay, I am having this issue, I'm having that problem. And in doing so, it could prevent someone from whether it be committing suicide, murder, because sometimes all they need is just a shoulder to cry on, or just to be heard, basically, just to be heard. And we ourselves as men, we don't like to do that. We have to figure out a way to be able to express ourselves to other persons and just get things off the chest, for say.
Yeah, and I think an important aspect of the whole thing with men's health is just what you mentioned. We have to have positive role models, celebrating positive role models. And sometimes men can mentor men. There's nothing wrong with that, with men mentoring men,
right,
in a very positive way. And that can help greatly in terms of men's health. It can help greatly in terms of men dealing with their issues, because there are some issues that men better understand than women, I think. And this year's theme for International Men's Day is basically better relations between men and women. And that's why I began and I said, we're here to talk about men's issues, but you cannot talk about men's issues in a vacuum. Somehow women have to come into play. And we speak in terms of, Nital, you can speak a little bit, elaborate on these things. Men in dealing with anger management issues, self-esteem issues, relationship issues, conflict resolution, better relations between men and women. We speak about these power plays in relationships, dominance, gender-based violence, and oftentimes it's the man exerting his power or his so-called power over the woman in terms of gender-based violence. Not that women don't do it to men, because they do it too, you know, but all of these issues pertaining to men and men's health.
Let me come in there. You know, it is interesting because ears, we spoke about the ears just now, and you have to ask yourself, who are raising our males? Who or what are raising our males? Because you could have a home that is in order, all ducks well aligned, instructions obeyed, but then 24 hours within a day. What about when they go to school? What about what they're listening on the radio? You might say that you do not want your children to be listening to a particular type of music, but then you buy devices for them to plug their ears. So right in your home, they could be listening to the stuff that you told them not to listen to. You have the DJs on the radio playing certain types of music. And when I listen to a song, I listen to the lyrical content of it. And when you hear the instructions being given, and you could see it amongst our females a lot too. If you say bend over, 6:30, whatever. And the guys, them are not different. They're carrying out the instructions. So sometimes we wonder if there's a need to censor some of the songs that we expose our children to. You go to a sports day, and the type of songs that the DJs are playing, they're non-conducive for the best development and positive development of the children. So you have to first list who and what are raising our children, and we try to adjust them. We can adjust them collectively because all of them would have their unique makeup. When we start to adjust those persons and situations or activities that are bringing up our children, then we'll get closer to working on the self-esteem, the anger management, and we need guys to start to be going home. Too many of our males, they have houses. What we need to develop would be homes. When you had a hard day's work or you had some challenging situation, some hard talk, you need somebody to go home to have a discussion. Right. Sometimes the female is more calming than the male. I mean, in recent times, you have some of them doing just as vicious. But on average, you have a female that would give you an A and tell you plain out, honey, that is not the correct thing to do. Go to the police, make a report. Because out there, the lesson is that strong men, you made a thing the other and said that males don't cry. Or boys don't cry. But males have an added layer of jeopardy in that the older guys will tell the younger guys, big men don't cry. So here you have the world telling you that boys don't cry, but then within the male construct, you have the older males telling the younger one that big men don't cry. So you need for them to be guided properly. I feel so nice when I have somebody that I can just let on with. Relationship ain't mean get ready to carry out your conjugal duties. Right. Yeah? It's not that. You have somebody who you can talk to. Because if you don't have somebody who you can talk to, you're with the wrong person. That is what you call incompatibility. Right. And maybe when the Bible spoke about being equally yoked, by extension it means things like that. Because you can't be into chemistry, somebody into Chinese, and you feel like living a happy life, eating food. But then when you try to explain anything, you don't know any Chinese.
You must have something.
So the communication.
Right. You must have something
in common.
You must have something in common, and what you have in common cannot just be your love for sexual intercourse. That will not keep a relationship.
Companionship is what we need.
It is companionship.
Right. Companionship. Right. And that is lacking.
Because intimacy does not necessarily mean sex. But sometimes we think that intimacy is actually sex.
You got intimate information that you wish to share with somebody that you wouldn't share with somebody else.
Right. And these are some of the issues. Now, in terms of, we're back to the health of men, physical health. What role does exercise play?
Well, in terms of the physical health, exercise play one of the major roles in the fact that it not only is a good source of stress relief, it helps you to burn that anxiety, burn out that frustration. You know, you may have a hard day at work, you go to the gym, or even at home, you just work out and you relieve that stress. It helps in reducing hypertension. It works in, just making you physically fit, mind, body, and soul. It really plays an important part, and everyone, including myself, needs to be more physically active and take an active role in exercising. It doesn't have to be gym exercise. It could be walking. It could be, riding bikes. It could be any sort of physical activity, playing some sort of sports or what's not, to keep yourself, because it will not only keep you physically healthy, it will keep you mentally healthy as well, and it could keep you spiritually healthy because it creates that clarity. It gives you that that space, that mindset. You can breathe more freely because when you feel good, you think good, and you perform well. So exercise is a major factor in reducing a lot of our health issues that affects men today, and it is something that should be adapted as a part of our daily routine.
What do you think we can learn from women in terms of how to take care of our health?
Spending more time in the mirror. I'm going to speak about the mirror, just not the physical mirror, but having a reflection of yourself almost on a daily basis. I felt at 6 inches today. By 10 o'clock, I felt 6.5. You must have a comparative analysis to carry. You reflect upon how, you see, you have to know yourself, Sometimes you might even be a better indicator of even when your pressure is high, outside the norm. Because you become so intimate with yourself that, no man, I'm feeling that, I need to go and take my pressure tablets. Or it might be very high, so I need to put one under my tongue to make sure I bring it down in quick fashion. And you could tell when you're trying to look at something and it look blurry, the resolution is poor. I mean that my sugar might be a little bit up too much. You have to become intimate with yourself. And that is what you find most females do. Most females are very, very intimate with themselves. They know how every single part of them function. And they know how they feel. You understand? So if that is a lesson, you see them in the mirror, but even though they're in the mirror, they're just not looking at their faces. The eyelashes extended 40 feet in front of them sometimes. They're just not looking at that.
I don't want to sound like Sigmund Freud.
Sigmund Freud, yes.
But a lot of his theory was surrounded by what we call the libido.
Mm-hmm. The ability to be up, yes.
The ability to be up.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you spoke about the hypertension and the diabetes and how those affect men. And they affect men's sexual health.
Definitely.
And sometimes taking these medication affects that aspect of a man.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
Correct.
And some men do not want to take these medications because of the side effect. Dr. Carter.
That is a great point that you're making. Because that is an excellent point. Because some of these hypertensive or diabetic medication or medication given to treat other illnesses will have secondary side effects. Some may include erectile dysfunction. And if I take the pill today and realize that this is what's happening, I would not want to, well, some men would not want to take it again because they want to be able to maintain that libido, as you just mentioned,
Mm-hmm.
always be on the point where you can readily, perform and fulfill your duties. But we need to understand by doing this, we are damaging ourselves further, because not taking the hypertensive medication will cause the hypertension to increase, and you will lead to more severe chronic stages of the disease, which will ultimately lead to stroke, heart attacks, and death. Like Nital mentioned, we have to become in tune with our body to know when something is wrong, because when you do this, you'll be able, like, okay, I'm not feeling wrong, I'm not feeling right, something is off, let me check this or let me do this, and then we go and we find what the problem is. We find the culprit, and then we're able to quickly attack it and resolve the solution. But if we are out of touch with ourselves, we will miss all the signals that the body is showing us and screaming at us like, hey, this is happening, like, look at me, like, do something. We'll completely miss those warning signs and go one way, and our body is telling us to go the next way, and we find ourselves completely, it would be a complete disaster, so to speak. But persons do not want to take these medications because it will have the secondary side effects, and that is the side effect that they're more concerned about. They're more concerned not in getting healthier or getting better, but how they could perform in the bed. And to most men, having an active sex life is more important than their actual health. So they would risk having strokes, heart attacks, or even kidney problems, vision problems, renal issues, just because they want to, have that moment of pleasure.
You have guys who will tell you they'll wreck their body to save their name.
Right.
I wreck my body to save my name.
Let's
Nobody.
take it there. I am not wrecking my body to save my name. But we are going to go to the phone lines.
Oh.
And the numbers to call are 466-2666, 466-2666, 662-8674, 662-8674, 767-4765, and the overseas number is 1-239-645-4500. 1-239-645-4500. We welcome your calls. Mr. Nichang.
Now, Dr. Cathy, since they realize that a major side effect is what we spoke about just now, why the pharmacologists would not take that into consideration and reduce that impact as they become more modernized in their techniques and their knowledge? Because you have a variety of pressure pills.
Right.
And what might work for you might not work for me. Might give me side effects that I can't stomach. I can recall a friend came to me and said, well, I teach, I not sacrificing my bedroom life for no pressure, And I did a little research and I realized that he could have taken graviola from the soursop and bring about the reduction, or maybe even garlic or whatever. And he substituted incrementally, and he's high praise now. He went down on the prescribed medication and went up on the graviola and the little garlic. And he has a happy life.
I'm glad you mentioned that point, because a lot of us think that these diseases can only be controlled by the recreational drugs and medication. And sometimes simple plant-based substances can do the trick. I mean, some garlic tea, some soursop, guava, they teach like it would not have the immediate effect like the medication will have, but in time and with the proper regime, they will actually help in reduction of anxiety, stress, depression, hypertension, as well as diabetes. There are multiple drugs out there to treat different illnesses, but the thing is, the drugs are fashioned, and they are fashioned to help the different types of individual, because what may work for a white male may not work for a man of color. So there are particular drugs that I will be able to take and somebody else will not be able to take, because it would not be effective for me like it would for you. So they have to take all this into consideration when manufacturing different types of drugs, and that's why there are a variety. And in terms of the hypertensive medication, there are medications that are for specific task. For example, one that may be directly indicated towards controlling with heart pumps, and others may be indicated to increase the diameter of the arteries, or to make them contract more better, or be dilated. So the medications are developed targeting specific receptors of the body as it relates to controlling certain diseases. So that they do take all of that into consideration, but they also have to include a person's age, sex, like I just mentioned earlier, the gender, the race, and how the body reacts to that medication, because something that may be beneficial for me, I may also be allergic to that medication and not be able to take it, and have to take the medication that would, have the secondary side effect. And
Yeah.
we'll have to find ways to work around that and go towards the non-pharmaceutical ways of dealing with certain issues, healthcare issues.
I think that is where the scientists would have been at right now with respect to evidence-based treatment.
Right.
It's an integrated approach. You do whatever you have to do to get the individual, all the attributes, qualities, characteristics of that individual factored in or integrated into the treatment process.
Right.
So what they would work for you would not work for me, and as such, the evidence-based treatment would take all that into consideration with a support group and everybody who should be key to that particular treatment. And you're correct, the integrated approach.
Right.
Right. And now we have the COVID-19. That's the big thing today.
Right.
And how that impacts on men's health and men's health issues. And one of the things that I read in WebMD, I mean, people who are diabetic and people who are hypertensive are more at risk.
Mm-hmm.
And what would be the message to men of how to take care of their health with respect to COVID-19? One of the things I read is that men who get COVID-19 are 6 times, or erectile dysfunction risk is 6 times higher in men with COVID.
So you have to encourage them. They call them underlying factors.
Right.
Each one of us would have a personal physician, family physician, who would guide us. They might say, look, you can take it, but you must let some time, you will experience these side effects. Once you explain to people what the side effects are and they anticipate getting these side effects, when they come on, they wouldn't be like a bolt from the blue and causing them to say they will not take the second dose. You understand? But I think, though, that people should be encouraged.
Right.
If you definitely cannot take it, you cannot. But once there's a probability, you have to ride that probability wave and see where is the peak of that probability wave to say, yes, you can take it, but with certain precautions. Because you might need to do certain things when you finish. A lot of people develop a fever. Nobody said to them, take some paracetamol. Because paracetamol good for the removing of fever, the taking down of the temperature. Something we just don't dialogue sufficiently. And maybe those who administer the vaccination should have some sessions with people. Let them know what to expect. People are already panicking and they're kind of apprehensive. They have their phobia. But if you could only say, well, this would happen, and it happened, there are a lot of confidence. They might come back for 5 doses.
Well, I agree.
Just talk to people.
I agree with you. The first step is getting your underlying healthcare issues checked out by your private practitioner, your doctor, because we see that the COVID-19 virus it would quicker affect someone that has underlying healthcare issues, whether it be, especially those who have underlying pulmonary, lung-based diseases. It will greatly affect them more than it will affect someone who is like healthy. So, you know, the hypertension, the diabetes, any sort of immunocompromised issues that the person may have. So the first thing in addressing this issue is that they will have to have a sit down with their private practitioner, like, okay, am I at risk of contracting this virus? And if I do, would my underlying issues be a problem? So you have to make sure that you have the diabetes and the hypertension controlled. And now we have the vaccine, which has been proven to be effective in, you know, the controlling of the spread of the virus. And persons should, I know, as Nita mentioned, it's a fear and a lack of information, but now we have so many, you know, sources of information. We have the 311 hotline, we have doctors and nurses at the hospital, we have our health centers, and they actually do have a questionnaire when one goes to take the vaccine, asking you, okay, you have these certain health conditions you take, and you'll be advised whether to see a doctor first, take the vaccine, or take it with precaution. And after taking it, you have to wait there for maybe 30 seconds or so, just to make sure that you don't have no secondary side effects that would prevent you from going on to taking the second dose. So people have to be able to have that information to be able to get over the fear and the panic, like, oh, I'm going to take this and something's going to happen to me. I mean, I'm fully vaccinated and I'm here still today, and I'm actually working in the COVID side of the emergency room, where I have seen persons both vaccinated and unvaccinated with the virus, and you can see the marked difference in how that person evolved with the virus, and in terms of whether or not there was they were vaccinated or have an underlying healthcare issue prior to contracting COVID-19. So yes, I would advise the persons to have a talk with their doctors, and if they are healthy enough and they have no underlying contraindications of taking the vaccine, it should be something of priority.
But if your message was the only message, that would have been bingo. But when you have misinformation and disinformation,
Right.
the person now would have to go through with a fine-tooth comb, and it's who they believe in.
Right.
Because you have some persons believe in certain persons who appear in social media, on the radio, and different programs. And regardless of if they now come and tell them one-on-one is 3, despite the years of knowing that one-on-one is 2, they would have a tendency to try to believe.
Definitely.
So how do you counter that? You understand? You try to send a message, which is good, and I say bingo, if that was the only path.
Right.
But it's like a drunken sailor. You're seeing 10 roads ahead of you, and that is why they stagger.
I agree.
But they want to travel every road.
I agree.
And some people are very gullible. They
Right.
don't take time out to maybe get a second opinion. If this person from this side said that, well, it got to be that. Even though it's wrong.
I agree, because
Yeah.
they have a lot of like media influencers, a lot of YouTube influencers, Facebook influencers that have millions of followers, and people look up for these people to, be their, in a sense, their savior, to show them the right path, the right way. So if you have someone that is against the vaccine, then you have the masses listening to those persons and be like, okay, I'm not taking it because this person said this, that person said that. Like you mentioned, there are a lot of misinformation out there being fed through many of the social medias, and as you mentioned as well, people are gullible and they will go with the first thing they hear. They will not take time to discuss it with their doctor, figure out, okay, hey, I heard this. Is it true? Am I at risk? What is the benefits of this thing?
But
Yeah, one of the reasons I raised the issue of
COVID.
COVID-19 is because we have said on this program that men are less inclined to look after their health. And they may be less inclined because of that to go and take the COVID-19 vaccine. That's also a possibility. But at the very same time, in the context in which we are today, part of looking after one's health definitely would have to take measures to mitigate against contracting the COVID-19 because of what it can do to your health. You mentioned the underlying conditions. And one of the things I mentioned, there are certain things specific to men. For example, it can cause erectile dysfunction and things like that. And so therefore, men have to take their health into their hands and make sure that they get vaccinated to protect their health.
And you're correct. But there's an economic side to that. Men are usually, by a margin, the breadwinner for families.
Right.
And they realize that, look, my madam, she works at this place, they would have been laid off. I'm the one who solely responsible for putting bread on the table. And those with conscience would realize that if I have to go and take the vaccine, I'll have to go and do it to put bread on my table as well.
Right.
So quite apart from the prostate and every other thing else, that economic factor would cause a lot of fellas, a lot of gentlemen to go and be vaccinated. And you see, Dr. Wilkinson composed that Calypso. Don't know if you have heard it.
The new one?
The very new one, yeah, with
I haven't heard the
Maui
new
singing
one.
it. And he indicated on a line, and I would have had discussions with him, that there are a lot of hypocrites because they rush to be vaccinated, but then they come out and convince you that you shouldn't take the vaccine. That is inside the Calypso, and that is a very strong point, and that is true. People would have already protected themselves with respect to the future projection, but yet they're telling you don't go, and they would have already taken the vaccine.
Yeah, but that is very unethical.
Yep.
And that is very selfish.
That is, yep.
It is really selfish. So in other words, you don't, it's not about just caring about myself, but about caring about my community.
Of
It's not
course.
just about self, but others. Why would I
Right.
take the vaccine,
And then tell you don't.
knowing that it's protecting me, and then tell you don't take it? It just doesn't add up.
Crazy.
It is the height of selfishness. Really.
That is true. Even in school, the person would tell you, oh, I didn't study for this test, but in fact they stayed up all night studying and they passed. And they're like, how you passed? You didn't study.
because they don't want to see you succeed.
Competition.
Exactly. So
They don't want to see you succeed.
But in this case,
there is a phenomena that they call, you're speaking about success in terms of tests and so on. You reach at the top of the ladder and then you kick it down.
Right.
You kick down the ladder because nobody else must attain what we would have attained.
How would you get down? Because you have to come down, you know. Regardless of where you are, you have to come down.
You have to
You
come
have
down.
to come down.
Dr. Carty, what are some of the foods? Are there foods that are particular to men's health in terms of vitamins and so on that can help with men's health, as opposed to women's health? Because there are some differences in terms of how men and women are made up, in terms of their bodies and their dietary needs and things like that.
Well, I would normally tell my male patients to, stick to grown provisions. The yam, the papayas, the yams and the eddos and the pumpkins and the potatoes. The more we go closer to the earth, the better it is. The more in terms of vitamins and minerals, we have all our fruits and vegetables. We have and it doesn't affect. It goes both male and female. It's not like, okay, an apple is more important to me than it is to a woman, because it will have the same impact. It may have a greater impact on one than the next, but it's going to still deliver that source of vitamin and mineral. You have your apples, your oranges, your grapes, all of the vegetables and the fruits. And I encourage these patients to go out, even to drink coconut water, keep themselves hydrated with fluids, and instead of having to constantly take medication, you can also look for your source of vitamin and minerals from the ground in terms of the fruits and the vegetables. So I would recommend all fruits, the melons, everything, soursop drinks, everything. I would recommend everything for them because it will help them both.
Right. I know there are certain things in terms of prostate health, like lycopene or lycopene.
Lycopene.
They're saying that in terms of men using tomatoes and processed tomatoes, that they're good for the prostate, for example.
Yeah, they have been research that links tomatoes to. I've heard that growing up because I personally don't like tomatoes, but then you hear it's good for the prostate. It's good for the prostate. You need to learn to like these things because it is beneficial to your health. And persons have done the research, seeing that the elements and the components of the tomato actually aids in the proper functioning of the prostate and could prevent progression to cancer. But the thing is, there are so many other factors involved in developing prostate-based issues. There are a lot of different risk factors, not just what you eat. So sometimes it has to be like a comparison, like, okay, I'm going to be doing this, but I also have this thing that is opposing me that could eventually lead to me getting prostate cancer.
So it is a multifactorial.
Yeah, it's multifactorial. I could eat all the tomatoes in the world, all the fruits and vegetables, but still have the factor of alcohol, drinking, family history of prostate cancer, as well as being a person of color. All those will other be factors that would, play a major role in making me could lead to the progression of developing, prostate cancer. So it is a multifactorial.
Right. Now, Nitel, what are some of the things that you think pertaining to men's health that can help positively with men's health, mental health?
You need to surround yourself with persons who are positive. When you have the glass with the water, you don't want the persons who say that the glass is half empty. You prefer the persons who would say that the glass is half filled. And those sort of conversations would go a long way. We need to talk more. Find somebody, it doesn't have to be a family member, because some persons get along better and form stronger bonds with friends rather than family. There's always some sort of thing inside that family to fight for. And sometimes it's so trivial. Outside, the person doesn't have any horse in the race, any intention of being placed on any will, so they're willing to talk to you as much as possible. Conversations. And we have to start eating better. When when you live a fast life, I know you're trying to manage a livable income. You must always take time out to rest. You must not only eat right, but you must rest well. And a lot of us do not get rest. And that is what the problem is. And if we get a home to go to, then we can go home and meet some food in a pot instead of rushing somewhere and getting something quickly. And most of those quick snacks or quick food, they don't have the nutritious value that we can actually calculate at home and tell the madam, put a piece of broccoli, put a piece of that. As a matter of fact, if I come from a family that is genetically predisposed for prostate cancer, I'll go to an old lady, have a conversation, and she said, boil this thing in a bush. And it would have worked magnificently for a number of persons. You must do your research to ask. You could get information as a person in the community who might have suffered from prostate. You ask them what they did apart from the medication, like you said, tomatoes. But surprisingly, the gentleman from Antigua, who seemed to be the expert on it, he said having sex at least as often as possible helps the prostate,
Yes.
mitigate against the prostate probability of further development. I forget the gentleman's name, but he's out of Antigua.
Some of that have been said.
Conversation and research.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Some of that have been said. Yes. We are out of time. Is there anything else that you would like to contribute with respect to men's health and how men can better take care of their health?
Well, in closing, all we can put out to the general public is that we need to just learn to ask for the advice and seek the help. It is not wrong. It doesn't mean that we're weak. It doesn't make us vulnerable in terms of asking for help. I mean, we need to get over the stigma and become aware and educated that seeking help and advice from persons who have done the research, persons who are in a position to actually help, will reduce certain mental health issues incredibly in terms of the mental health as well as the NCDs, and in terms of psychologically, just having that close person to speak with, to be able to communicate better with, it would help us and allow us to go a far way.
And our society would have to rid itself of this cultural stigma that once somebody sees a psychologist or psychiatrist, we label them as crazy, and they say once crazy, always crazy. That sort of thing permeating our society is not good. We have to do more embracing. We have to be more sympathetic. We have to be more empathetic. And sometimes some of us, the part of the brain that is responsible for empathy, seem not to be fully developed in a lot of us because the way we treat people with mental illness. And we have to bring it down from the top, pass laws. Why should there be a struggle between the police and the hospital as to where this person should be? Should you put them out of prison or should you bring them to be institutionalized? We have to work on that and we have to embrace them, and after they are released, nothing is sweeter and greater and more effective than family therapy. The embracing of an individual who has a mental health. No medication can substitute for the embracing by a family unit. It goes a long, long way. Some persons even recommend family therapy, and people just take it for granted. We tend to discard our family members as long as they would have had some issue from a mental perspective, because we don't wish to be associated. We even pass them straight. We see rain falling, fire could be dropping out the sky, and nowhere you want anybody to know you're related to that person. And that culture would have to change. That is my
Yeah, you mentioned a very good point, Nital, and we're sorry that we're out of time. We could have elaborated more on it. The whole aspect of stigma and discrimination. I know we didn't speak a lot in terms of HIV and AIDS,
Right.
but there's a lot of stigma and discrimination still with respect to HIV and AIDS. At one time, it was thought to be a gay man's disease,
Right.
and 10 times when you hear someone or a male has HIV and AIDS, you think,
Automatically.
that is correct. But yet you have more heterosexuals than anything else. who have
Cases.
HIV cases. And then the whole aspect you mentioned, you know, the stigma, but then the whole reform and rehabilitation of persons and that sort of a thing, and that seeking help is not a sign of weakness, it's rather a sign of strength.
Right.
Awareness, heightened awareness.
Yeah, because to say that I have a problem and that I need help is not a sign of weakness, it is a sign of strength. To cry is not a sign of weakness. To cry is a sign of strength. It shows that you are human, you are vulnerable, and so therefore, but you don't stay there. You can seek help and move on. And a lot of, we look at the prisons, for example, when we talk about men, and our prisons are filled with more men than women. That's another thing, and that tells a whole story in terms of men in our society. And the focus on rehabilitation of our male prisoners, and that's so that when they come out, that they will have a healthy perspective on life and living, and look after their health, you know, their emotional health, how they deal with issues and so on. But sometimes the society does not allow them. And that's, you know, and so therefore you have recidivism. Sometimes people end back, and there's a whole cycle like that. So when we're talking about men's health, we have to look at that whole thing too, in terms of, you know, how men relate to one another, the whole thing of violence and crime, and all of that impacts on the society. It impacts on men's health, and it impacts on the society. When we look at men's health, when we pay attention to men's health, and when men pay attention to their own health, it can only redound to the greater good of the society.
Self-intimacy.
Self-intimacy. Self-intimacy. Because if men don't look after their health, it impacts economically and socially and in all kinds of ways negatively on our society and on the family unit.
Of course.
Definitely.
Productivity.
Definitely.
And all of that in our society is affected when people do not have good health. So I want to thank you very much, Dr. Carty, Jonathan, but people mostly call you Kyle, but it's Jonathan Kyle Carty.
Yes, that's right.
But that's the name that I was sent, and you work in the accident and emergency area at the Joseph and France General Hospital. Yes. Thank you so much for coming and sharing with us on this important topic of men's health and well-being. And Nitel, thank you as well. Forensic scientists. I've heard about forensic accountants. I've heard about the area of, could you just tell us a little bit in terms of what does it mean?
From a psychological perspective, you take it a little deeper. You raise red flags. You make people aware, like if you have the police force, for example, you got what you call fit for duty assessment. You might have somebody whose vacation is due in December. You're looking at the person in April. You make a recommendation, look, you got to pull that vacation forward. And this person would not be as effective. You'll get diminishing returns from the hours that they need to put in. So you raise red flags. You see persons who on a job and wouldn't take vacation for 10 years, apart from the possibility that they might be trying to protect some paper trail, is that they're wrecking their bodies, because you must get rest. You got something they call the circadian rhythm. Your body got to develop a rhythm, and if it go out of sync, then it impacts your brain, and that is what my PhD is going to be about. Persons who get insufficient rest, what will be the impact on our brain.
Right. Okay, well, thank you to both of you very much for this very interesting discussion, and a discussion that I think that we should have more of in our society. Thank you to all of our listeners to our program today. Next week we'll be back with another edition of Working for You. Until then, I am Les Roy Williams. Take good care.